The vast expanse of space stretched before Captain Sarah Chen as she stood on the bridge of the United Earth Defense Force flagship, the UES Defiant. Her dark eyes scanned the holographic displays, a frown creasing her forehead. The reports flooding in from the outer colonies were grim. Another distress call. Captain, Lieutenant Rodriguez reported, his voice tight with tension. The Zarkath fleet has breached the defenses of Novus Prime. They're requesting immediate assistance. Sarah's jaw clenched. The Zarkath, a warrior race from the Andromeda galaxy, had appeared in Earth's solar system 6 months ago. Their massive battleships dwarfed anything humanity had ever constructed, and their energy weapons cut through Earth's most advanced shields like they were made of paper. "Patch me through to Admiral Xin," Sarah ordered, straightening her uniform. The holographic display flickered, revealing the weathered face of Admiral Xin, Supreme Commander of Earth's forces. "Captain Chen." The Admiral greeted her, his expression grave. "I assume you've heard about Novus Prime." Sarah nodded. "Yes, sir. We're prepared to engage the enemy and provide support to the colonists." Admiral Xin's face hardened. "Negative, Captain. You are to hold your position and protect Earth at all costs. We can't risk losing our last line of defense." "But, sir," Sarah protested, "millions of civilians will die." Xin finished, his voice heavy with regret. "I know, Captain. But if we lose Earth, humanity is finished. Those are your orders." The transmission cut off, leaving Sarah staring at empty space. She turned to face her crew, their faces a mix of fear and determination. They were the best Earth had to offer, but against the technological superiority of the Zarkath, they felt helpless. As if to punctuate their despair, a new transmission crackled to life. It was an open broadcast from the Zarkath commander, General Krovac. His reptilian features filled the screen, yellow eyes gleaming with malice. "Humans," he sneered, his translator conveying his contempt perfectly. "Your pitiful resistance amuses us. Your weapons are primitive, your defenses laughable. We have conquered 1,000 worlds, and yours will be no different. Surrender now, and perhaps we will be merciful." The broadcast cut off, leaving a deathly silence on the bridge. Sarah could feel the weight of her crew's gaze upon her, looking to her for guidance, for hope. "He's right, you know," a voice spoke up. It was Ensign Parker, barely out of the academy. "Our weapons can't even scratch their hulls. How are we supposed to fight them?" Sarah strode towards the young ensign, her boots echoing on the metal deck. She stopped in front of him, her eyes boring into his. "They may have better technology, Ensign," she said, her voice carrying across the bridge. "They may have bigger ships and stronger weapons, but there's one thing they don't have." She turned to address the entire crew. "They don't have our spirit. They don't have our determination. They don't know what it means to be human." Sarah's voice grew stronger, filled with conviction. "Throughout our history, humanity has faced impossible odds. We've stared into the abyss of extinction and clawed our way back. We've turned our weaknesses into strengths, our failures into stepping stones for success." She clenched her fist, a fire burning in her eyes. "They laugh at our weak army. Let them laugh. Because when they face us, they'll learn what true strength is. It's not about the size of our ships or the power of our weapons. It's about the fire in our hearts, the unyielding will to survive, to protect our home and our loved ones." Sarah could see her words taking effect, sparks of hope igniting in the eyes of her crew. She pressed on, her voice rising with passion. "We are humanity. We've split the atom, cured diseases, and reached for the stars. We've created beauty from chaos and found unity in our diversity. And now we face our greatest challenge. But I tell you this, we will not go quietly into the night. We will not vanish without a fight." She swept her gaze across the bridge, meeting the eyes of each crew member. "We're going to show these Zarkath what happens when they underestimate the human spirit. We're going to fight with everything we've got, with every ounce of courage and ingenuity we possess. And when this is over, they'll never forget the day they faced humanity." A cheer erupted from the crew, the sound of renewed determination filling the bridge. Sarah nodded, a grim smile on her face. She turned back to the viewport, staring out at the stars. "Prepare for battle," she ordered. "It's time to show the galaxy what humans are made of." As the UES Defiant powered up its engines, ready to face the seemingly invincible Zarkaf fleet, Sarah Chen knew one thing for certain. This would be a battle that would echo through the ages. The Zarkaf had laughed at humanity's weakness, but they were about to learn a harsh lesson. Sometimes, the most dangerous enemy is the one you underestimate. The spark of ingenuity. As the UES Defiant maneuvered into position, the vastness of space seemed to shrink around them. The Zarkaf fleet loomed ahead, their massive ships blocking out the stars like a swarm of metal locusts. Captain Sarah Chen stood at the helm, her mind racing with possibilities and strategies. "Status report," she barked, her eyes never leaving the tactical display. Lieutenant Rodriguez's fingers flew over his console. "Zarkaf fleet approaching, Captain. We're detecting energy buildups in their main weapons arrays. They'll be in firing range in 3 minutes." Sarah nodded, a plan forming in her mind. She turned to her chief engineer, Commander Akira Tanaka. "Akira, remember that crazy idea you had about modifying our shield frequencies?" Tanaka's eyes widened. "The phase shift harmonics. But Captain, it's untested. We have no idea if it'll work or blow us to Kingdom Come." "Well," Sarah said with a grim smile, "we're about to find out. You have 2 minutes to implement it." As Tanaka rushed off, barking orders into his comm, Sarah addressed her weapons officer. "Lieutenant Harper, I want every scrap of processing power. We have analyzing the Zarkaf weapon signatures. Look for patterns, fluctuations, anything we can exploit." "Aye, Captain," Harper replied, her fingers already dancing across her console. The bridge hummed with tension as the crew worked feverishly. Sarah could feel the weight of responsibility pressing down on her, but she pushed it aside. There was no room for doubt now. 30 seconds to weapons range," Rodriguez announced, his voice taut. Sarah tapped her comm. "Tanaka, status." "Ready as we'll ever be, Captain," came the reply. "Phase shift harmonics are online. I hope you know what you're doing." "So do I," Sarah muttered. She raised her voice. "All hands, brace for impact. Activate phase shift harmonics on my mark." The Zarkaf ships opened fire, their energy weapons lancing out across space. Sarah waited, her heart pounding, until the beams were almost upon them. Now, the Defiant's shields flickered and shimmered, the phase shift harmonics kicking in. The Zarkaf weapons struck, and passed right through, their energy dispersed harmlessly into space. Cheer went up from the crew, but Sarah wasn't celebrating yet. "Harper, what have you got?" The weapons officer's face was lit with excitement. "Captain, I've detected a recurring pattern in their shield modulation. There's a split-second vulnerability every 17.3 seconds. Sarah's mind raced. "Can we exploit it?" Harper nodded. "If we time our shots precisely and concentrate all our firepower on a single point, we might be able to punch through." "Do it," Sarah ordered. She opened a channel to the entire ship. "All hands, this is the captain. Prepare for attack run. We're going to show these aliens what happens when they underestimate human ingenuity." The Defiant surged forward, weaving through the massive Zarkaf ships. Energy beams crisscrossed space around them, but thanks to the phase shift harmonics, they passed harmlessly through the human vessel. "Target locked," Harper announced, firing solution ready. Sarah leaned forward in her chair. "Wait for it. Wait for it. Fire." The Defiant's weapons unleashed a concentrated barrage, perfectly timed to exploit the split-second weakness in the Zarkaf shields. The shots punched through, striking the alien vessel's hull. Explosions blossomed along its side, and the massive ship began to list. Direct hit, Harper shouted triumphantly. Their primary power core is destabilizing. Sarah allowed herself a small smile. Good work, everyone. But this fight's far from over. Prepare for another attack run. As the Defiant banked around for another pass, the Zarkaf fleet seemed to hesitate. For the first time since they'd arrived in Earth's solar system, the aliens were on the defensive. General Krovak's face appeared on the main view screen, his reptilian features contorted with rage. Impossible, he snarled. How did you penetrate our defenses? Sarah met his gaze coolly. You made a mistake, General. You assumed that because our technology wasn't as advanced as yours, we weren't a threat. But humanity's greatest strength isn't our weapons or our ships. It's our ability to adapt, to think outside the box, to find solutions where others see only problems. She leaned forward, her voice filled with steel. You came here thinking you'd found easy prey. Instead, you've awakened a sleeping giant, and now you're going to learn why it's a bad idea to underestimate humans. Krovak's eyes narrowed. This changes nothing. We will crush you beneath our... Sarah cut the transmission with a wave of her hand. She turned to her crew, seeing the fire of determination in their eyes. They thought they had us beaten, she said. They laughed at our weak army, but we've just shown them that humanity is anything but weak. We've bloodied their nose, and now it's time to press our advantage. She pointed at the tactical display, where the Zarkaf fleet was regrouping. They're scared now. They've lost their air of invincibility. And that fear, that doubt, is going to be our greatest weapon. Sarah's voice rang out across the bridge. This is our moment. This is where we show the galaxy what humans are truly capable of. We may be outnumbered, we may be outgunned, but we will never, ever give up. Today, we fight not just for Earth, but for every world that's fallen to these tyrants. Today, we prove that the human spirit is the most powerful force in the universe. As the crew cheered, Sarah turned back to the view screen. The battle was far from over, but for the first time since the Zarkaf invasion began, hope burned bright in her chest. They had found a way to fight back, and now nothing would stop them. The Defiant surged forward, ready to take on the entire Zarkaf fleet. The aliens had come expecting an easy conquest. Instead, they were about to experience the full fury of humanity unleashed. The tide turns. The void of space erupted into a dazzling display of energy beams and explosions as the battle between the UES Defiant and the Zarkaf fleet intensified. Captain Sarah Chen's strategy was working. The human ship darted between the massive alien vessels, exploiting their newfound weakness with surgical precision. Another hit. Lieutenant Harper called out, her voice filled with fierce joy. That's their third capital ship disabled. Sarah nodded, her eyes never leaving the tactical display. Good work, but don't get cocky. We've bloodied their nose, but they're far from beaten. As if to emphasize her point, a barrage of energy beams lanced out from the remaining Zarkaf ships. Most missed or were deflected by the phase shift harmonics, but one struck home. The Defiant shuddered violently, alarms blaring across the bridge. Damage report. Sarah barked, steadying herself against her command chair. Lieutenant Rodriguez's fingers flew over his console. Hull breach on Deck 7. Emergency force fields holding. Shields down to 62%. Sarah's mind raced. They couldn't keep this up forever. Even with their newfound advantage, they were still vastly outnumbered. They needed to turn the tide decisively, and fast. Captain, Commander Tanaka's voice came over the comm. I have an idea. It's risky, but it might just work. I'm all ears, Akira, Sarah replied, dodging another volley of Zarkaf fire. We've seen that their ships are vulnerable when they fire their main weapons, Tanaka explained. What if we could force them all to fire at once, then hit them with everything we've got? Sarah's eyes widened as she grasped the plan. We'd need one hell of a big target to make them commit like that. Exactly, Tanaka said, his voice grim. We use the Defiant as bait. For a moment, the only sound on the bridge was the distant rumble of weapons fire. Then Sarah nodded. Do it. Rig every spare bit of equipment. We have to emit false energy signatures. Make us look like the fattest, juiciest target they've ever seen. As Tanaka set to work, Sarah addressed her crew. Listen up, everyone. We're about to do something incredibly dangerous and more than a little crazy. But if it works, we might just win this war today. She outlined the plan quickly, watching as determination replaced fear in the eyes of her crew. They knew the risks, but they also knew the stakes. Lieutenant Harper, Sarah said, turning to her weapons officer, I want every weapon we have primed and ready. The millisecond their shields drop, I want you to hit them with everything we've got. Understood. Harper nodded, her jaw set. Aye, Captain. They won't know what hit them. Minutes ticked by as Tanaka and his team worked feverishly. Finally, his voice came over the comm again. We're ready, Captain. On your mark. Sarah took a deep breath, steeling herself for what was to come. All hands, brace for impact. This is going to get rough. She tapped a control on her chair, opening a channel to the Zarkath fleet. Attention, General Krovac. This is Captain Chen of the UES Defiant. We're powering up our primary weapon. In 30 seconds, we will fire, and your fleet will be destroyed. Your only hope is to strike first with everything you have. She cut the transmission before Krovac could respond. Now came the hard part, waiting. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, as one, the Zarkath fleet lit up. Every ship, from the smallest frigate to Krovac's massive dreadnought, powered up their main weapons. Energy buildup detected across the Zarkath fleet. Rodriguez reported, his voice tense. They're taking the bait. Sarah gripped the arms of her chair. Steady, steady. The Zarkath weapons reached full power. Sarah could almost feel the alien gunners tensing, ready to fire. Now, she shouted, kill the emitters and fire everything we've got. The false energy signatures vanished just as the Zarkath opened fire. Their massive energy beams lanced out and passed harmlessly through empty space where they thought the Defiant's vital systems were. In that same instant, Harper unleashed the Defiant's full arsenal. Missiles, energy beams, and projectiles of all kinds streaked towards the Zarkath ships. With their shields down and weapons discharged, the aliens were sitting ducks. The results were catastrophic for the Zarkath. Ship after ship erupted in flames as the human weapons found their marks. Krovac's dreadnought took the worst of it, its massive hull torn open by multiple direct hits. As the explosions faded, an eerie silence fell over the battlefield. The remaining Zarkath ships drifted aimlessly, their weapons and engines disabled. Status report, Sarah said, hardly daring to believe what she was seeing. Rodriguez's voice was filled with awe. Captain, we've done it. The Zarkath fleet is disabled. We've won. A cheer went up from the crew, but Sarah remained focused. Open a channel to General Krovac. The alien commander's face appeared on screen, smoke and sparks visible behind him. His yellow eyes, once filled with contempt, now showed only shock and fear. General Krovac, Sarah said, her voice steady. Your fleet is defeated. Your invasion has failed. I suggest you surrender immediately. Krovac stared at her in disbelief. How? How is this possible? You were nothing. Weak. Primitive. Sarah allowed herself a small smile. That's where you made your mistake, General. You judged us by our technology, not by our spirit. You thought because our ships were smaller and our weapons less advanced, we would be easy prey. But you forgot one crucial thing. She leaned forward, her eyes boring into Krovac's. We're human. We don't give up. We don't back down. And when our backs are against the wall, that's when we're at our most dangerous. Remember that, General. Remember the day you learned why it's a bad idea to underestimate humanity. As Krovak's image faded, replaced by the sight of the broken Zarkaf fleet, Sarah felt a weight lift from her shoulders. They had done it. Against all odds, humanity had prevailed. But as she looked out at the stars, Sarah knew this was just the beginning. The galaxy now knew of humanity's existence and of their strength. Whatever came next, Earth would be ready. The laughter had stopped. The mockery was silenced. And in its place, a new legend was born. The legend of how humanity's weak army had defeated the greatest threat the galaxy had ever known. Echoes of victory. The days following the decisive battle were a whirlwind of activity. As news of the UES Defiant's victory spread across the solar system, a wave of jubilation swept through humanity's colonies. Ships that had been in hiding emerged to assist with rescue efforts and secure Zarkaf vessels. The aliens, once so fearsome, were now prisoners of war, their arrogance replaced by a newfound respect for their human captors. Captain Sarah Chen stood in Admiral Sin's office aboard the orbital defense station above Earth. The older man's face was a mix of pride and weariness as he reviewed the after-action reports. "You've done the impossible, Captain," Sin said, looking up from his datapad. "Not only did you save Earth, but you've also given us a fighting chance against the rest of the Zarkaf Empire." Sarah nodded, her posture straight despite her exhaustion. "Thank you, sir, but it wasn't just me. Every member of my crew, every scientist and engineer who worked on our defenses. They're the real heroes." Sin smiled. "Modest as always, Sarah, but don't sell yourself short. Your leadership made this victory possible." His expression turned serious. "However, we both know this war is far from over." "The Zarkaf will be back," Sarah agreed. "And next time, they won't underestimate us." "Precisely," Chin said. He tapped a control on his desk, and a holographic map of the galaxy sprang to life between them. "Which is why we're launching a counteroffensive. We're calling it Operation Lighthouse." Sarah studied the map, noting the highlighted systems and movement patterns. "We're taking the fight to them." Sin nodded. "Thanks to the data we've recovered from the captured Zarkaf ships, we now have a map of their empire. More importantly, we know the locations of several of their subjugated worlds." Understanding dawned on Sarah. "We're going to liberate them." "Exactly," Chin said, his eyes gleaming. "The Zarkaf have spent centuries conquering and oppressing other species. Now we're going to free them. And in doing so, we'll build an alliance that can stand against the Zarkaf Empire." Sarah's mind raced with the implications. "It's ambitious, sir. We'll be operating far from our supply lines, in unknown territory. Which is why I'm putting you in charge of the mission, Captain," Chin said. "The UES Defiant will lead a task force of our most advanced ships. You've proven you can think on your feet and adapt to unexpected situations. That's exactly what we need out there." Sarah felt a mix of honor and trepidation. "I thank you, sir. We won't let you down." As she left the Admiral's office, Sarah's comm chirped. It was Commander Tanaka. "Captain, you need to see this," he said, his voice excited. "We've made a breakthrough with the Zarkaf technology." Minutes later, Sarah stood in one of the station's labs, surrounded by a team of human and alien scientists. Among them was Zarla, a young Zarkaf engineer who had defected during the battle. "Captain," Zarla said, her reptilian features set in what Sarah had learned was an expression of excitement. "We've managed to reverse engineer the Zarkaf fold drive. With some modifications, we can install it on the Defiant." Sarah's eyes widened. "You mean we'll be able to use their faster-than-light technology?" Tanaka nodded enthusiastically. "Not just use it, Captain. Improve it. By combining it with our phase shift harmonics, we can create a hybrid drive that's more efficient and powerful than anything the Zarkaf have." "This will change everything," Sarah murmured, her mind already racing with the tactical possibilities. Zarla stepped forward, her posture hesitant. "Captain, I want to thank you. My people have been ruled by fear for so long, the strong dominating the weak. But you humans, you've shown us another way, a better way. Sarah placed a hand on Zarla's shoulder, smiling. That's what humanity is all about, Zarla. We believe in standing up for what's right, in protecting those who can't protect themselves. And now we have a chance to spread that belief across the galaxy. As she left the lab, Sarah's comm chirped again. This time, it was Lieutenant Rodriguez. Captain, you've got to see this. It's all over the news networks. Sarah rushed to the nearest view screen, where a broadcast was playing. It showed crowds gathering in cities across Earth and its colonies. People of all races and backgrounds were celebrating in the streets, waving flags and chanting slogans of unity and defiance. But what caught Sarah's attention was a recurring image, a stylized depiction of the UES Defiant, surrounded by the much larger Zarkaf ships. Underneath was a simple phrase that was being repeated across 1,000 worlds. They laughed at our weak army until they faced the humans. Sarah felt a lump in her throat. This wasn't just a military victory. It was a turning point for her entire species. Humanity had faced its greatest challenge and emerged stronger than ever. As she watched the celebrations, Sarah's resolve hardened. The battle was won, but the war was just beginning. And this time, humanity wouldn't be fighting just for survival. They would be fighting to build a better galaxy, one where strength wasn't measured by the size of one's weapons, but by the courage in one's heart and the strength of one's convictions. The Zarkaf had laughed at humanity's perceived weakness. Now, the entire galaxy would learn the true meaning of human strength. And Sarah Chen, along with her crew, would be at the forefront of this new era of exploration, liberation, and hope. As she turned away from the screen, Sarah's eyes fell on the emblem of the United Earth Defense Force. For the first time, she truly understood the weight of the motto inscribed beneath it. Per ardua ad astra, through adversity to the stars. Humanity had faced its trial by fire. Now, it was time to claim their place among the stars. Beacons of hope. The UES Defiant hung in space, its sleek hull gleaming in the light of an alien sun. Around it, a small fleet of Earth's most advanced ships formed a protective screen. Captain Sarah Chen stood on the bridge, her eyes fixed on the blue-green world below them. Scanners are picking up significant Zarkaf presence on the surface, Captain, Lieutenant Rodriguez reported, mostly around the major population centers. Sarah nodded, her expression grim. As expected, the Acadians have been under Zarkaf control for over a century. This won't be easy. It had been 3 months since the battle that had turned the tide of the war. Operation Lighthouse was in full swing, and the Defiant Task Force had already liberated 2 worlds from Zarkaf control. But Acadia promised to be their toughest challenge yet. All ships report ready, Captain, Commander Tanaka said, looking up from his console. The new fold drives are functioning perfectly. Sarah allowed herself a small smile. The hybrid drives, combining human ingenuity with Zarkaf technology, had given them a crucial edge. They could now strike deep into enemy territory with unprecedented speed and stealth. Very good, Sarah said. She tapped her comm. This is Captain Chen to all ships. Commence Operation Firestarter. As one, the Earth fleet engaged their stealth systems and began their descent towards Acadia. The plan was daring, perhaps even reckless. But if it worked, they would liberate an entire world with minimal casualties on both sides. As they entered the atmosphere, Sarah felt the familiar tension coil in her stomach. So much could go wrong. But she pushed the doubts aside. Her crew was the best in the fleet, and they had faced worse odds before. Ground teams ready for deployment, Lieutenant Harper reported. Zarkaf defense grid is still offline. Sarah nodded. The virus they had uploaded to the Zarkaf systems was working perfectly, keeping the aliens blind to their approach. Deploy on my mark. 3, 2, 1, mark. Across the fleet, drop pods streaked towards the surface, each carrying a team of Earth's finest soldiers. Their mission: to take out key Zarkaf command centers and rally the Acadian resistance. Captain, Rodriguez called out, his voice urgent. We're picking up a transmission from the surface. It's on all frequencies. Put it through, Sarah ordered. The bridge speakers crackled to life, and a voice filled with desperation and hope spoke in halting English. This is Zakara, leader of the Acadian resistance. If you can hear this, if anyone can hear this, we need help. The Zarkath air. The transmission cut off abruptly, replaced by a harsh, familiar voice. Pitiful creatures, General Krovac sneered. Did you really think your primitive signals would reach anyone who cared? Sarah's fists clenched. Krovac had escaped during the chaos following the battle over Earth and had apparently taken personal command of the occupation of Acadia. Patch me in, Sarah said, her voice hard. On all frequencies. Rodriguez nodded, and Sarah spoke, her voice ringing out across the airwaves. This is Captain Sarah Chen of the United Earth Defense Force. We hear you, Zakara, and we're here to help. There was a moment of stunned silence. Then Krovac's voice returned, filled with disbelief and rage. Impossible. How did you? Sarah cut him off. You should know by now, Krovac. Nothing's impossible for humans, especially when we're fighting for what's right. She turned to her crew, her eyes blazing with determination. All ships, drop stealth. Let's show these people what humanity stands for. The Earth fleet shimmered into visibility, their weapons charged and ready. On the surface, the drop pods had landed, and Earth's soldiers were already engaging the surprise Zarkath forces. This is your only warning, Krovac, Sarah broadcast. Surrender your forces and leave this world, or face the consequences. Krovac's reply was predictable. Never. This world is ours by right of conquest. We will crush you and your pathetic allies. Sarah shook her head. Wrong answer. She turned to Harper. Target their primary command center. Precision strike only. I want to minimize collateral damage. Harper's fingers flew over her console. Target locked. Captain. Fire. A beam of concentrated energy lanced down from the Defiant, cutting through the Zarkath defenses like they were paper. The command center erupted in a controlled explosion, its systems overloading, but the blast contained to prevent harm to the surrounding city. Across Acadia, similar scenes were playing out. Earth forces, using their advanced technology and tactical superiority, systematically dismantled the Zarkath occupation force. The Acadian resistance, emboldened by the arrival of their allies, rose up in mass. Hours passed in a blur of tactical displays, status reports, and rapid-fire decisions. Sarah coordinated the entire operation from the Defiance Bridge, her mind racing to stay ahead of Zarkath counterattacks and adjust to changing battlefield conditions. Finally, as the planet's primary sun began to set, Rodriguez looked up from his console, his face split by a wide grin. Captain, we've done it. The last Zarkath stronghold has fallen. Acadia is free. A cheer went up from the bridge crew, but Sarah remained focused. Casualties. Minimal on our side, Rodriguez reported. Zarkath losses are heavy, but most were captures, not fatalities. Acadian civilian casualties are remarkably low, given the scale of the fighting. Sarah nodded, relief washing over her. Well done, everyone. But our job's not finished yet. She opened a channel to the planet's surface. Zakara, this is Captain Chen. Your world is free. What do you need from us? The reply came swiftly, Zakara's voice thick with emotion. Captain Chen, there are no words to express our gratitude. We had almost lost hope. But you came. You fought for us when no one else would. Sarah smiled. That's what humans do, Zakara. We stand up for what's right, no matter the odds. As the Defiant orbited the liberated world, Sarah looked out at the stars. The Zarkath Empire was vast, and there were countless other worlds like Acadia out there, suffering under alien oppression. But for the first time, there was hope. Humanity had been thrust onto the galactic stage. emerging from obscurity to become a beacon of freedom and justice. They had been laughed at, underestimated, dismissed as weak, but they had proven that true strength came not from advanced weapons or massive fleets, but from courage, ingenuity, and an unwavering commitment to doing what was right. The laughter had stopped. The galaxy was watching, and humanity was just getting started. The rising tide. The Grand Assembly Hall on Acadia was filled to capacity. Representatives from a dozen liberated worlds sat alongside human diplomats and military leaders. At the center of it all stood Captain Sarah Chen, her uniform crisp and adorned with new medals, a testament to the victories of the past 6 months. "The Galactic Alliance of Free Peoples," Sarah said, her voice carrying across the hall. "That's what we're proposing. A union of worlds united not by conquest or fear, but by shared values and mutual respect." Murmurs of approval rippled through the crowd. Zakara, now serving as Acadia's provisional leader, stepped forward. "We owe our freedom to Earth, to humanity. Without you, we would still be slaves to the Zarkath Empire. We stand with you, now and always." One by one, the other representatives voiced their support. Species that had been bitter enemies under Zarkath rule now found common ground in their shared struggle for freedom. It was a powerful moment, one that filled Sarah with both pride and a sense of overwhelming responsibility. As the assembly concluded, Sarah's comm chirped urgently. "Captain," Lieutenant Rodriguez's voice came through, tense and worried. "We're picking up massive fold space disturbances. The Zarkath. They're coming in force." Sarah's blood ran cold. She had known this was coming, but not so soon. "Understood. Sound the alarm. I'm on my way." Minutes later, she was back on the bridge of the Defiant, watching as the tactical display filled with red dots representing Zarkath warships. It was the largest fleet they had ever encountered, dwarfing even the invasion force that had first attacked Earth. "They're not taking any chances this time," Commander Tanaka observed grimly. "They mean to crush us once and for all." Sarah nodded, her mind racing. "They've learned not to underestimate us, but so have our allies." She opened a channel to the assembled ships of the fledgling Galactic Alliance. "This is Captain Chen. The enemy is upon us. Remember why we fight. Remember what we've achieved together. We are no longer alone in this universe, and united. We will not fall. Prepare for battle." The response was immediate. Ships from a dozen worlds moved into formation alongside the Earth fleet. Each brought unique technologies and tactics to the fight, a diversity that had proven to be their greatest strength against the monolithic Zarkath war machine. As the enemy fleet drew closer, a familiar face appeared on the main view screen. General Krovak, his scales darker and his eyes burning with hatred, glared at Sarah. "You've been a thorn in our side for too long, human," he snarled. "Did you really think you could challenge the might of an empire that has stood for millennia? Your pathetic alliance will crumble before our power." Sarah met his gaze steadily. "You still don't get it, do you, Krovak? You see our differences as a weakness, but it's our greatest strength. Each world you enslaved, each species you oppressed, they all bring something unique to this fight. Together, we're more than a match for your empire." Krovak's response was cut off as the first salvos were fired. The space between the two fleets lit up with energy beams, missiles, and exotic weapons Sarah had never seen before. The battle had begun. Evasive maneuvers. Sarah ordered, "Tanaka, get our new shield modulation online. Harper, coordinate fire with the Acadian cruisers. Target their command ships." The Defiant danced through space, its hybrid drives allowing it to move in ways that confounded Zarkath targeting systems. Around it, the ships of the Alliance fought with a ferocity born of long-suppressed hope and newfound freedom. An Acadian battlecruiser, its hull gleaming with crystals that absorbed and redirected energy, shrugged off a barrage from 3 Zarkath destroyers before retaliating with a weapon that seemed to fold space itself, crushing the enemy ships like tin cans. A swarm of nimble fighters from the avian Aetheri race darted between capital ships, their natural flying abilities translated into piloting skills that left Zarkath gunners firing at empty space. And there, in the thick of the fighting, was the Defiant. Sarah's ship had become a symbol of hope for the Alliance, and she pushed it to its limits. They struck hard and fast, exploiting weaknesses in the Zarkath formation that only became apparent when viewed through the lens of a dozen different tactical doctrines. Hours passed in a blur of tactical decisions, near misses, and hard-won victories. The Alliance took losses, each one felt keenly by Sarah, but the Zarkath fell in greater numbers. Slowly but surely, the tide of battle turned. "Captain," Rodriguez called out, his voice filled with excitement. "We've broken through their lines. Their flagship is exposed." Sarah saw the opportunity immediately. "All ships, focus fire on the flagship. Let's end this." The combined firepower of the Alliance fleet converged on Krovak's massive dreadnought. For a moment, it seemed like even this wouldn't be enough. Then, with a flash of inspiration, Sarah opened a channel to the Aetheri squadron leader. "Commander Zephyr, can your pilots get inside their shields?" The avian's trilling voice came back instantly. "We can try, Captain. What do you have in mind?" Sarah quickly outlined her plan. It was risky, borderline insane, but it just might work. Moments later, a squadron of Aetheri fighters streaked towards the Zarkath flagship, slipping through gaps in its defenses that only they could perceive. Once inside the shields, they launched specially modified warheads, a human design enhanced with Akkadian crystal tech. The weapons phased through the flagship's hull, reappearing inside its vital systems. The resulting explosion was spectacular. Krovak's dreadnought broke apart, secondary explosions rippling along its length. As escape pods jettisoned from the dying ship, the rest of the Zarkath fleet fell into disarray. "They're retreating," Harper shouted, disbelief and joy mingling in her voice. "Captain, we've won." Sarah allowed herself a moment of relief before squaring her shoulders. "Send out search and rescue teams. I want as many of those escape pods recovered as possible." She paused, looking out at the aftermath of the battle. "We're not just here to defeat them. We're here to show them a better way." As the Alliance fleet began the process of securing their victory, Sarah reflected on how far they had come. From a single ship fighting against impossible odds to an interstellar alliance that had just dealt a crippling blow to an ancient empire. They had been laughed at, dismissed as weak and primitive, but humanity, and the allies they had inspired, had proven that true strength lay not in domination, but in unity, in facing challenges not alone, but together. The battle was won, but Sarah knew the war was far from over. The Zarkath Empire was vast, and this defeat would only drive them to more desperate measures. But for the first time since the conflict began, she allowed herself to truly believe. They would win this war. And in doing so, they would forge a new future for the galaxy, one of freedom, cooperation, and hope. A new dawn. The great hall of the Galactic Alliance headquarters buzzed with anticipation. Representatives from hundreds of worlds, once part of the Zarkath Empire or independent species who had joined the cause, filled the vast chamber. At the center of it all stood Captain Sarah Chen, now Admiral Chen, her uniform adorned with the insignia of both Earth and the Alliance. It had been 5 years since the battle that had turned the tide of the war. 5 years of hard-fought victories, painful losses, and unimaginable discoveries. But today, at long last, they stood on the precipice of peace. Sarah took a deep breath, her eyes scanning the assembled delegates. She saw familiar faces, Zakara from Acadia, Commander Zephyr of the Aetheri, and dozens of others who had fought alongside humanity in their quest for freedom. But there were new faces too, including the contingent she never thought she'd see in this hall. With a nod to the chamber's eye, Sarah began to speak, her voice carried to every corner of the vast room and broadcast across the galaxy. "Friends, allies, and honored guests, We stand here today not as conquerors, not as victims, but as equals. 5 years ago, the galaxy laughed at humanity's weak army. They underestimated our resolve, our ingenuity, and our capacity for unity. Today, we have proven that true strength lies not in domination, but in cooperation. She paused, letting her words sink in. The war is over. The last holdouts of the Zarkath Empire have laid down their arms. But our work is far from finished. We now face the challenge of building a lasting peace, of healing wounds centuries in the making, and of forging a future where all species can thrive together. Sarah gestured to a group of delegates seated to her right. I would like to introduce our newest members to the Alliance, former General Krovak, and the representatives of the Zarkath worlds. A murmur ran through the crowd. Krovak, once their fiercest enemy, stood slowly. His once proud posture was humbled, but there was a new light in his eyes. 5 years ago, Krovak began, his voice rough with emotion. I stood before Captain Chen and mocked her world's weakness. I was blind, arrogant, trapped in an ideology of supremacy that had guided my people for millennia. He looked around the room, meeting the eyes of those his people had once oppressed. I stand before you today not to ask for forgiveness, but to offer my people's commitment to this new path. We have seen the error of our ways, and we choose to stand with the Alliance in building a better future for all. Sarah nodded, a small smile on her face. It hadn't been easy convincing the Alliance to accept the Zarkath's surrender and offer of peace, but she knew that true victory lay not in destroying their enemy, but in transforming them into allies. This is the power of the ideals we fought for, Sarah continued, not to crush those who oppose us, but to show them a better way. We've faced challenges that seemed insurmountable, but each time, we emerged stronger by standing together. She activated a holographic display, showing the known galaxy. Hundreds of points of light represented Alliance worlds, with new connections forming between them even as they watched. Look at what we've built together, Sarah said, her voice filled with pride and hope. A network of worlds, each unique, each bringing their own strengths to our union. We've unlocked scientific discoveries that were unimaginable just a few years ago. We've bridged cultural divides that once seemed impassable, and we've proven that diversity is not a weakness to be feared, but a strength to be celebrated. The hologram shifted, showing the construction of massive structures in space. The Geneva-class peacekeeping stations, Sarah explained. A joint project combining technologies and expertise from dozens of worlds. These stations will serve as hubs of diplomacy, scientific research, and cultural exchange. They stand as a testament to what we can achieve when we work together. Sarah's voice grew softer, but no less intense. But we cannot rest on our laurels. There are still worlds suffering under oppression, species yet to be discovered, and challenges we can't even imagine. Our journey is far from over. She straightened, her eyes blazing with determination. So I say to you all, let us move forward not with arrogance, but with humility. Not with fear, but with courage, and not alone, but together. Let the laughter that once mocked us now be transformed into cheers of unity and hope. Sarah raised her hand, and as one, the assembled delegates rose to their feet. For Earth, for every world in our alliance, and for those yet to join us, let us forge a future worthy of the sacrifices that have brought us here. A future of peace, of discovery, and of limitless potential. The chamber erupted in applause, the sound of hundreds of species united in purpose washing over Sarah like a wave. As she looked out over the sea of faces, human, Akkadian, Aetheri, Zarkath, and dozens more, she felt a profound sense of awe and responsibility. They had started this journey alone, mocked and underestimated. Now they stood at the head of a galactic alliance, ready to face whatever challenges the universe might throw at them. As the applause faded and the work of building their new future began, Sarah thought back to that first battle, to the moment when humanity had proven its worth among the stars. They had been laughed at, dismissed as weak, but they had shown the galaxy the true meaning of strength. And in doing so, they had not only saved themselves, but had ignited a beacon of hope that would light the way for generations to come. The laughter had stopped, replaced by a chorus of unity that would echo across the cosmos. Humanity had faced the stars and found not just its place among them, but its purpose, and that, Sarah realized, was the greatest victory of all.